200 people in that room, and each one wants me to be somebody else.
How do you sing then?
I put myself in another place.
Enigmatic is a word that I have often heard used when describing singer-songwriter Bob Dylan. But for me, a better word would be impenetrable. Over the years, I have been able to understand that Bob Dylan is a great songwriter, but only on a very objective level. By way of comparison, I love the music of the Beatles subjectively and unconditionally because listening to the Beatles fills me with very strong emotions. Emotions that make me want to burst out singing, even dancing as if I'm a character in a theatrical musical production. Now, I will admit that over the decades, I have discovered a small handful of Bob Dylan tracks, most of them his biggest hit singles, that actually do affect me emotionally. But outside of that small handful of songs, the rest of his catalog, I'm afraid, has remained as enigmatically and emotionally impenetrable as the man himself. And for most of my life, I have found this to be rather frustrating. Growing up, I have always envied my older brother who owned every Dylan album and could hear the universe when he listened to him. But all I could do was ask myself, why can't I hear what he hears? The answer is we all react differently to art, and not everyone can like chocolate. But that answer, while true, just wasn't good enough for me. My older brother doesn't like every artist I like, and I'm sure he loses no sleep over it. And, admittedly, he likes a lot of artists that I really don't worry too much about either. But Dylan is different. To be aware of an artist that is admired the world over is considered a songwriter, and yet I couldn't seem to hear him the way others did. I wanted very much to hear Dylan the way my brother and countless music fans around the world heard him. So every couple of years, I would go back to the well of Bob Dylan, listen to a couple of his albums, and leave empty-handed. Again, save for that small handful of songs. But then finally, in 2023, something remarkable happened, and a Bob Dylan album spoke to me. The album was Blood on the Tracks. Side note, I should mention that Tangled Up in Blue was part of that small handful of Dylan songs I mentioned earlier. End of side note. But listening to the album in 2023 unlocked a door. The year before, I had given several listens to Blonde on Blonde, but again to no avail. So finding myself enjoying Blood on the Tracks was like being given partial sight. I even went back to Blonde on Blonde to see if I could hear it differently, but no such luck. However, I was grateful for even partial vision. And this brings me to the movie A Complete Unknown, directed by James Mangold. In anticipation for this movie, I watched the Todd Haynes-directed film I'm Not There. And while I understood the concept of this film, having various actors playing different personas of Bob Dylan, I felt myself feeling mostly ambivalent towards the film, as it did very little to spark any real appreciation for the man's music. But not so with A Complete Unknown. Now first, let me just talk about this as a film. There is so much that director James Mangold gets right with this movie. The first of which is to not try and be a career-spanning film, and to choose instead to just cover Dylan's very early years. Starting with his migration to New York City in 1961 to meet his musical idol Woody Guthrie, and ending with his now legendary performance at the Newport Folk Music Festival in 1965. A Complete Unknown does a remarkable job of putting me into the time period that spawned Bob Dylan, a time period that included McCarthyism, the assassinations of JFK and MLK, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, the last of which plays a much more important role in this film than I could have ever anticipated. And this is one thing that separates A Complete Unknown from other music biopics that I have seen. Most music biopics will offer lip service to the historical events that occurred in whatever decade the film takes place in. But A Complete Unknown actually offers very real and tangible connections between these events and how they played into the folk music scene that was occurring at the time. Even I knew the broad strokes of Dylan's career history, but this film made me feel like I was living in them. I was given a tremendous sense for how powerful and vibrant the folk music scene in New York was at this time. A music scene that in the beginning, Bob Dylan would benefit from. A music scene that would facilitate his first brush with success, and a music scene that would in return also be elevated by his soaring popularity. Only for him to turn on it when the same scene that helped build him also tried to box in his musical ambitions. The story of A Complete Unknown is about a person who was in the right place at the right time, but also about someone who had the talent to back it up. It's also about the need of an artist to not be creatively boxed in by others. I'm glad to see that throughout all of this, James Mangold does not shy away from the fact that Dylan could sometimes be a major asshole to those around him as well. So now let's talk about the performances. This cast is amazing, starting with Timothée Chalamet. And honestly, I have decided this man is just too damn talented, and something needs to be done about him. I'm just kidding, of course. He actually learned to play guitar for this role, and he learned how to sing as well. He took guitar lessons, he studied with a vocal coach and a harmonica coach, and he sang and played all the performances live on set. Edward Norton is so completely immersed in the role of Pete Seeger that I kept forgetting he was Edward Norton. I also have to mention Monica Barbero as Joan Baez, who along with giving a great performance also manages to emulate the real voice of Joan Baez perfectly. There's also Scoot McNairy playing a very aged and very ill Woody Guthrie, and who manages to deliver a very powerful and emotional performance without the benefit of being able to speak, and he does this beautifully. Also, I should mention the very wonderful performance by Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. Getting back to Timothée Chalamet, I have heard some complaints from other online reviewers who have stated that they agree that his performance was brilliant, but that they wish that the movie could have given them more of a sense of who Bob Dylan was. And honestly, I think that they are missing the point. Dylan, during his lifetime, has been notorious for being enigmatic and mysterious, and for keeping both the general public and the press at a certain distance. And that is what I see in this film. A man who is very ambitious, talented, and knows it, and who guards his true self from everyone around him, and maybe even from himself. I never really expected this film to tell me who Bob Dylan really is, but I did hope that it would give me a better appreciation for his music, and after walking out of the theater, I think it's doing just that. I can remember listening to Maggie's Farm off of Bringing It All Back Home a number of times prior to seeing this film, and thinking to myself, it's okay, I guess. But I have to say that now that I've seen this film, I have a completely new perspective and appreciation for the song. Since leaving the theater on Christmas Eve, I have been listening to the freewheeling Bob Dylan, Bringing It All Back Home, and Highway 61 Revisited every single day. And each day, I feel like I have a better insight into the characters that inhabit his songs. For decades, I have felt puzzled as to why I wasn't more into Dylan. I have always felt envious that I couldn't join this particular club. And that is why every couple of years I would listen to a Dylan album and see if I didn't feel differently. As a result, I do have a fair amount of his albums in my music collection right now. The last thing I expected from a biopic was for it to unlock my ears in the way that it has. But over the last few days, that's what's been happening. As I have been listening and re-listening, I feel like I'm no longer just listening to the music, and instead, I am experiencing it. And I have to admit, it feels really good. This is TJR. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours. Have you seen the movie? What do you think? Do you plan on seeing it? As always, if you like these videos, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. A big shout out to my Patreon supporters. Patreon supporters do receive exclusive weekly videos not available on this channel. If you can't be a Patreon supporter, I understand. You can always leave a one-time super thanks. That really helps out a lot. You can also just click like. That helps too. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.